As I stand before you on this day, I stand as a physician, I stand as an astronaut, as you just heard. I also stand as an entrepreneur. I've been involved in venture capital for over 20 years, investing in telemedicine. So I'm bringing you all of those perspectives when I talk about the economy, the new space economy. And I want to share that because not many people know what's going on. You see the sound bites from Elon Musk and from SpaceX, and you probably heard of Blue Origin. There are many more. And so at the end of my talk, I hope you'll come away with that this is really something. This is what I consider to be an industrial revolution. So let me start with this. This whole notion of space and space exploration, I think at the very beginning when President Kennedy in 1962 laid out that groundwork, that call to action. I don't think they ever imagined what's happening today. And even me, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, and you remember those words, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, it was a tremendous leap for this little boy to look at that little black and white television and decide to follow in their footsteps. And that was just the beginning of what we're seeing today. We have built a foundation probably of the last 50, 60 years of exploring space, which started off, of course, with the lunar landing, and then also those of us I call the old heads that flew the space shuttle. Now we're doing things. And then that led to the International Space Station, which has really opened the door for a lot of innovation and technologies that are not changing only what we do in space, but what we're doing here on Earth. I know there's a lot of words here. I'm just going to highlight a few things. So as I talk, just sort of, if you can, kind of take a look at those things. I'm going to highlight a few things. This is all of the space operations in the United States, and only the United States. So these are spaceports all over this nation that are launching, spacecraft into space, either satellites or human space flight. And we've actually finally got to the threshold where we're actually launching more commercial missions than government-sponsored missions. And that's a turning point for where we're going with this new space economy. So you'll see words in here about we're building space assets, and I'll show you some of those assets in a second. We are establishing the business case for low Earth orbit, and we're doing that through the International Space Station and a lot of work that we're doing in other platforms that you may not know about. And that creates this supply and demand that will create this ecosystem that's going to make everything come into place. And now we have this platform that will cause us to increase our knowledge. And every time we increase our knowledge, we increase innovation. That innovation then leads to advances in technology and ultimately, with my business hat on, opportunities in business. And that's what you're seeing playing out right now. So I mentioned a minute ago that I would share with you all of the companies that are being involved. This is a fraction of the companies that are involved. And I put an asterisk by NASA to represent all of the governments that are now involved in space in one way or the other. You probably heard that India just launched a vehicle. You probably heard that the GCC just launched a vehicle to Mars. So everybody's getting involved in this. But look at these names. These are the big names: SpaceX, Blue Origin, Boeing. Well, we won't say a lot about Boeing, but they're gonna turn it around. I can tell you that. I have a friend who's running the company, and I know they're going to turn it around. And setting the stage for a lot of things. Axiom, you probably not have heard of Axiom, but Axiom was one of the first companies that actually hired commercial astronauts, professional astronauts to go to the International Space Station. And there is talk that they will actually build a commercial module that will connect to the International Space Station. Sierra Space you don't hear a lot about, but they are a rising company. And Rocket Lab is also. And then lastly, I put in Virgin Galactic because those of us who have been around the space business, you know that Branson was that wild guy, that exciting gentleman who really, I think, for me, sort of brought home this notion of commercialization of space with the things that he's doing. 10 or 15 years ago, I was asked by NASA to serve on the Commercial Space Committee. And that committee was charged with coming up with a strategy for getting more private industry involved with space. And we have been, wildly successful. And the thing I'd like to mention to audiences, because you hear about SpaceX and Blue Origin and Sierra, and you think that they're putting all of their money. No, NASA actually provided the seed capital to start all of this. So don't forget that. And that's an important role in a public-private partnership, to start a thing, to close the business case that allow these companies to come of age. If you look at the chart, you'll see the blue is the government launches and the yellow, the commercial launches. So look at that slope of that curve. And it's going to go even higher as more and more companies get involved and more organizations and governments get involved. I listed a few things here. So what are we going to do up there? Well, we're going to continue to do the satellite thing that we're doing. It would be remiss for me to not mention that I think who has satellite internet? A bunch of folks here. So never did we think that we would be using internet from low Earth orbit, right? Until Elon Musk, put the satellite system in place. And that allows us to now have satellite coverage no matter where you are around the world. We're going to be doing onboard manufacturing. There's going to be, when we get to the moon, the plan is we're going to be mining on the moon. And one of the things that you might ask the question, what are we mining? Well, one of the first things we've identified is that the moon has a lot of helium. Helium is scarce here on this planet. There will be on-orbit platforms, you could imagine, all different things, and as technology and knowledge expands. And then lastly, medicine. So I'm working with a group that has anticipated that we're going to have more and more people, regular people, going into space. And no longer are they going to have to be that creme de la creme like we were, quote unquote, supposed to be back in the day, but people who have normal health issues, high blood pressure or heart disease. Why shouldn't they go into space? And we know enough now through our work at the International Space Station that that's possible. So this company is creating a medical company to support any one of you in this room that might want to go into space. So that is where we're headed. The last chart I'll show here is the number of commercial launches. And again, you see that slope that since 1989, there have been over 536 launches. And if we just look at the 2021 numbers, that represents over $300 billion. And that was 2021. Imagine what it is now. So with that, I'm going to end with this, and it's really a question to you and a question to the audience with this statement that what we're doing in space, the technology advancements, the business cases that are going to be involved are going to change us here on Earth. And whether you want to travel in space with us or stay here on Earth, you're going to be impacted by that. And the question I have is, every time we develop a technology, everybody talks about AI these days, is that we need to make sure that we, from a human psychological standpoint, social standpoint, are prepared for that. And I highlighted two areas that need some focus. And one, of course, is the workforce, and the other is education. We need to make sure that our children are prepared for that future. So thank you very much.